Living Adventurously is brought to you in partnership with Komoot, the route planning and navigation app that helps you make the most of your outdoor adventures. Whether you're cycling, hiking, running, or bike packing, Komoot's easy-to-use technology will get you out the door and exploring more of the great outdoors. You can see where I've been exploring by checking out the highlights of my journey on Komoot. Just follow the link in the show notes. My name is Alistair Humphreys. I set out on a bicycle journey around Yorkshire to speak to interesting, ordinary people who, in very different ways, are making an effort to live adventurously. I wanted to talk about what they do, about the barriers they've faced along the way, and to seek their perspective on some of the big questions that all of us encounter in our lives. Welcome to Living Adventurously. I've written here, needs intro music. Okay, here we go. That'll do. I woke up really early on the banks of the River Wharfe, packed away my gear covered in dew, and set off to ride to Hebden Bridge. I stopped on the way to mosey around the steep cobble streets of Haworth, where the Bronte sisters lived and wrote their books. And then I slogged up the Oxenhope Pass. It's one of the Tour de France hill climbs when it came this way. And then up onto the beautiful, broad, empty moorland, before hurtling for miles down the other side into the quirky, creative, outdoorsy town of Hebden Bridge. So I was pretty hungry by the time I reached Brant's house, and I gratefully accepted his offer of scrambled eggs. And then Brant took me on a short, sharp, fun run through the woods across the canal opposite his house. And then, for some bizarre reason, I can't remember why, we sat on his kitchen floor for me to ask him about his varied life of bikes and businesses. Brant, thank you very much for welcoming me to your house, making me scrambled egg.
No problem.
It's very nice to meet you. One thing I'm interested in is how to get started in stuff in life. Going from having an idea to actually making it happen. And from over our scrambled eggs, it seems that you have done a lot of starting of stuff.
Yeah, I guess I can only talk from sort of my experience. But I've been involved in quite a lot of projects. I got involved in mountain biking quite early on, and I always claim accidentally became a journalist just by writing to a magazine and sort of doing some reviews of things.
So you wrote to a magazine, and what did you tell them?
We told them that their bike reviews were terrible. This was MBUK, probably in about 1989, something like that. And we just didn't feel that the bike tests were very good. And we knew that the way we were riding bikes around the Leeds area was much rougher and tougher than we could see in their bike tests.
I like that idea of write to someone and tell them, not only tell them what you're doing is rubbish, but offer a decent way to improve that as a way of getting yourself signed up for something.
Oh, there's an awful lot of people that tell you're doing a terrible job. I think the other thing that it's that just wanting to jump in and help and not immediately look at locking people down with contracts and payment and what's the plan and everything like that. You have to go into, I have to go into things fairly sort of open-minded, potentially with the risk that I may be taken advantage of, but hopefully, instilling some sort of sense of goodwill gestures, and then hoping it'll all plan out in the future. You can't go in there with a contract and say, these are my terms. You have to have a try. It's a bit like falling in love with a beautiful woman. You go on a few dates and you see what happens, and you eventually, 6 years later, end up sharing a house and your life with her.
Signing the contract then. First date, would you recommend the David Hockney Gallery at Saltaire?
Saltaire, lovely. My first date was sat on a bench in Rochdale with a cup of tea, and that's worked out quite well.
Oh, later. That's good advice. Okay, so you moving back from dates to starting of stuff. You became a journalist, but you've also started quite a few brands related to cycling. Can you tell me a bit about that?
So, having been, I think is it poacher turned gamekeeper? Is that the phrase? When you go from so I used to review bikes, and then ended up hanging out with my friend Dave, who he used to import and manufacture bikes under the brand Planet X, and he had some sample frames, some single speed sample frames made up that he'd spotted was a trend coming, and I didn't really like single speeds at that time. This would be about 1999. But I rode this bike and it was great, and I could see how it would become a market, and I could see that it was quite difficult to buy a single speed bike. Everybody was sort of making them kind of homespun, making them in the garages, bodging them up from other things. So one of the things we did with On One was make it easy for people to buy into that new thing, get an off the shelf single speed bike. So that was On One, and that grew. That was one of the very first online bike companies, it's grown and it's still existing today. Everybody's doing online bike companies then, but we decided to start the hardest way possible by making a single speed online bike company. That worked, so we figured pretty much anything else would.
So what did you, from starting that up, what are some of the biggest mistakes you made that you learned lessons from?
I mean, the hilarity that you get into, like our first bikes turned up and all the head tubes were the same length, just because we'd just not specified that at the factory. So we had to make some sort of nonsense up about how it was to promote low standover so you wouldn't catch yourself on the top tube. There'll always be some sort of drawing error or mistake. I mean, one of the things I always think about is that I figure right now Apple have like the iPhone 15 sat there, but they're going to sell us the iPhone 14 and the 13 and the 12 and the 11 before that now. There's always a point. You have to, whenever you're doing, anything, there has to be a point where you say, yeah, enough is enough. I'll press the button now and go for it. Holding off and trying to achieve perfection is usually some sort of recipe for disaster. As long as the disasters that you don't create by not making everything perfect don't kill you.
Okay, so I suppose that, well, there's I think another problem with striving for perfection is that then you just don't actually start.
Yeah, or stop. If you're doing a project for financial gain, at some point you have to sell the thing. All the R&D and testing and whatever in the world. In the real world, it just doesn't work. There is nobody going to give you millions of pounds for development anymore. That may have happened in the past. It may happen with very odd sort of drugs type scenarios or things like that. But you've got to sell these things. And to get a good product out there, whatever that product is, whether it's a physical product or a virtual product, you've got to get that thing out there and start making money, and trying to control as much of that cost, by keeping costs low, by not giving too much of anything away. Make things, sell them for more than they cost you, and plough that money back into whatever it is you need to do.
So, do you advocate just starting with some ridiculously small version of a idea rather than trying to think, I want to make some new shoes? Right, first thing I need to do is buy a massive factory. How do you go about starting something?
I all my projects tend to be working with existing people who are very good at doing what they're doing, and I love going to a factory and rooting around in their back rooms and cupboards and old show samples and finding things, and then sort of mixing them up in a slightly different way, putting a spin on it that even they don't understand, finding a unique position, and then moving forward with that. I mean, I remember when we first started doing single speed things, we went to Joytech, who were a hub manufacturer, and we wanted them to make us a single speed rear hub for a dirt jump bike with 135mm rear spacing. And they had literally no idea. They said, well, no, this is a BMX product. Mountain bike products are very lightweight for cross country. Why do you want this? And we were like, no, this is the spec. We need to take that hub shell, that axle, that cassette body. And they made us that product and said, this will never sell. And we sold hundreds of them. Or we've done things with like maybe a raw finish mountain bike frame, where the frame is just phosphate coated and then maybe matte lacquered over the top. They're saying, well, this looks terrible. Nobody's going to buy this. And we're like, no, that's exactly the look. Or the rust is different on this one. We cannot make them all the same. And I'm like, well, it's no problem. People live that individual thing. So it's seeing what a manufacturer can do and then putting your spin on it and being able to move forward with that to give yourself some difference in the market. That said, that there's lots of great stuff out there and there's lots of people want to buy different stuff. And so it's just about making your stuff different to give yourself some personality.
So the bike stuff was going well. You're selling lots of bikes. Why do you then decide to start making trousers?
Trousers were the thing that I started.
Do you like trousers?
I've got over 40 years of, nearly 50 years of trouser wearing experience, which I think counts for quite a lot. Trousers was an industry that went on in my local town here in Hebden Bridge. And about 4 years ago now, due to sort of family circumstances, my children came to live with me full time because their mum was ill. And I could no longer keep going across to China to do sort of factory inspections and trade shows and all that sort of thing. And so I realized at that point that I could make a pair of trousers myself about as well as I could weld, as in I couldn't do it at all. But there was a really good factory here and I could, give them directions, say, a bit like this, put the pockets there, make them out of this material, a bit wider here, a bit straighter there. And then you realize that actually you're not really a cycle industry person. You're just somebody that works with the factory, and then you're able to tell the story of that product, make a good quality product, and market that on the internet quite successfully. We managed to sell, unbelievably, a week's production at this factory, they claimed, was 176 pairs. And we thought it'd be fun if we could sell a week's production. Though 176 pairs did sound a lot. And we launched a campaign on Kickstarter for my brand HebTroCo. And we managed to sell 176 pairs of HebTroCo trousers in 5 hours, 10 minutes. So we walked. Well, we emailed the order to the factory the next day, and then went in a week later to be met with sort of the owner of the factory looking at us a bit confused, saying that he thought it hadn't gone very well because he hadn't got an order and it had actually gone into his junk folder.
Oh, no.
So we then found lots of other orders in his junk folder that he didn't know about either.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the demise of British industry. Could be down to spam filtering rather than anything else.
So why did that the HebTroCo? Why did they sell so many trousers so quickly? What's the appeal?
We just made a British-made trouser made of moleskin, which is a sort of a cloth that has real history around here. Hebden Bridge is known for kind of moleskin and corduroy trousers, and whilst the moleskin that we were using, there isn't a moleskin mill anymore. The moleskin factory was sold to the Chinese in 1983, but it was like just a twist on it. And we got some really good sort of momentum from a Single Track mountain bike magazine forum. Somebody just posted on there. Ed and my business partner, Ed Oxley, and me, we both had quite good sort of social media contacts. And, everybody needs trousers. Even people with one leg need trousers, don't they? So,
do you make trousers for people with one leg?
We've not yet made trousers for people with one leg, but sadly they would cost the same as people with trousers for people with two legs because the cost is all sort of balls up, as it were.
Is it?
Yeah.
You can't just get half each.
No.
Go partners with another. Okay. Don't know what to ask after that.
Flummoxed you there.
Yeah. Are you still involved in the trouser company?
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of the interesting things about starting a business is that you've really got to look at cash flow. And about a year ago, we just realised that the two of us paying ourselves like ridiculous salaries and going to lunch every day really was going to kind of burn through the company money. Our very good accountant, Mr. Fitton in town, said, "Lads, do you want to run this company or eat it?" And we just looked at cash flow and I kind of then decided to go and sell bicycle helmets and whatever else with Planet X. Having spent sort of 3 years selling very expensive trousers to people, it was relatively simple to sell, very affordable cycling accessories to people, using kind of the similar channels we've been doing in the past. And so back to Planet X I went, I think for the third time now.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing I'm really bad at, I don't know if it's bad, let's say, one thing I'm really bad at is changing direction. As in, I've essentially been doing the same thing more or less now for, getting on for 20 years. And whenever I think, right, what I should do now is change and do something different with my life that would be interesting. I firstly can never have a good idea. And secondly, I get too scared to even consider doing it. So do you like doing all these changes from business to business, or is it more circumstance?
Well, you see, I'd say you're talking nonsense there. Because,
hey, this is my podcast.
No, because you started out writing books, and now we're recording a podcast. So that is a change of direction. You are essentially a publisher publishing a story about you to allow people to buy into your ideas and give you money to allow you to carry on doing things. I was very briefly involved, not in a romantic sense, with Sir Ranulph Fiennes a very long time ago.
I love that you have to qualify that.
Not romantically involved.
Because both the listeners would be thinking that was what the assumption. Okay.
Not romantically involved. And he rang me up. He was going to do something involving mountain bikes. And I said, oh, my goodness, you're a great adventurer, I think. A word you used to describe yourself, Alistair, yeah? And he said, no. I just write books. I have to come up with these ridiculous ideas to allow me to write books to make money. So I felt that was sort of the other way that you feel sometimes.
I've always hated that Ranulph Fiennes approach. He always gives that of, why do you do this? Oh, to pay the bills. I think it's such a willfully miserable answer. I apologise, Sir Ranulph, but I totally disagree with you on that.
I do love the cafetiere story, which is worth looking into anyway. But change. No, I mean, I think I guess I kind of like selling things to people. I like selling things to people that people think are fun, or people think are nice, or people think are good value. I've never been very good at creating sort of these layers of mystique and nonsense and gloss. Everything that I've done, I think, is relatively straight. So even though we make, oh good Lord, there's a belt that we sell at HebTroCo, and it costs, I think we said one is £250. It's insane, but I can show you why that is. The copper plate that's cut in Batley, then it goes to Tommy. Tommy spends 2 hours shaping this buckle. The leather comes from that cow in Devon, so I can show you why. I mean, it is a ridiculous price for a belt, but it's not really a belt. It's a talisman of British manufacturing, British craft. It's a beautiful...
Shall I show you my belt?
Is it a piece of string? It is a piece of blue rope. That's lovely. You don't really need... If you get the right size trousers, you don't need a belt anyway.
Yeah. Well, if you ride a bike for a long time, then you do need a belt.
So it's just sort of cutting through. So with On One, we just made, simple frames made of 4130 tubing that were welded with a good geometry. I remember a funny phone call from Reynolds, the tubing manufacturers, who said that, did we want to use Reynolds 520 tubing? No, did we want to buy a sticker saying Reynolds 520? I said, well, we don't use 520 tubing. They said, no, you do. We just sell you a sticker and then you put it on. It's the same tubing. And at that point, you just then realise the sort of smoke and mirrors that go on, that the names that people use for things, it's just a generic product, but they're just putting a badge on it to give it some extra credence. I got quite cross. So we made DN6 tubing because DN6 was the beginning of our postcode at that time. So we had DN6 tubing because we were based in Doncaster at that point on one. And then we didn't have to pay $5 to Reynolds 520. And then we wrote a big story on the website about this great rip-off that was going on, which Reynolds weren't right happy about. But anyway,
no,
so yeah, cutting through the nonsense and selling the right good thing. Do you notice how I went a bit broader when I said that? That's a bit Yorkshire. That's
a good strap line there. Okay, I want to change direction now and ask you about running. Because I got here this morning, I was quite knackered. And you said, do you want to go for a run? And I said, I'm really busy. And you said, come on, I really want to show you my wood. Yeah. So we went for a run.
We went for a run in a wood, yes. Yes, my wild wood. So I've been running kind of on and off for about, started running about 5 years ago. basically because I was sick of bikes. I'd sort of left the bike industry under a bit of a cloud. But even when I was in it, it was just the fact that when you design bikes, it's hard to kind of go for a ride without constantly analysing head angles and tyre grip and rebound damping and there's so much, so much complexity there. Are my tyres at the right pressure? So much can go wrong. Got a puncture, headset's loose. And so there's a real joy of, being quite busy as I am. I've got 3 kids. I work from home. I'm quite disorganised. The house is quite small. I haven't got a hose pipe outside. There's one at the back of Blazing Saddles, though. But running was good because it meant I could run all those lovely technical trails in Hardcastle Crags and all around Calderdale that we used to ride a lot. Really got into that. Then about 4 years ago, snapped my hamstring due to kind of probably incorrectly spec'd shoes, too much height. Had insoles in as well to correct my gait. And then when I was kind of didn't run for a couple of years, rode a bit, but just wanted to get back to running and started reading more and more about the sort of minimal shoes, barefoot running shoes, much lower to the ground, things like that. And I guess that sort of started playing with the kind of geeky side of my brain. I like the idea. And also thinking back about that gait analysis, well, if the ground is kind of moving around, if you're not landing flat, then how does it matter where your foot is angled? Because your foot's going to be angled anyway. And that kind of led me on to thinking about kind of angled shoes and the shape of shoes and why were so many shoes very flat on the bottom. And essentially for the last kind of 2 years, I've been designing my own shoes, which now means that every run is a bit like mountain biking used to be. I'm now analysing what happens. So I'm ruining running for myself as well at the same time. But
this is I just asked you to tell us about the run, and you've just talked about. You've gone on to talking about product, and shoes, which is interesting because I guess it says a bit about what's going through your head.
I didn't pay for Psychoanalytica this morning. I'm quite a producty person. But coming back to it, I run for health. I run to de-stress. I run to stop me getting a dad bod. I run because I quite like drinking beer and eating curry and I don't want to get fat. I want to keep looking good. I've got a young girlfriend. I don't want her running off with anybody else. She doesn't run very fast, but anyway, that's good if you want to run a long way. I like running with her because she slows me down and I can keep going. I'm a bit sort of hare. She's not a tortoise. But I like to run. I like to run in this very, very technical wood. It's very twisty, turny, tree roots, boulders, up, down, different surfaces. It helps me solve problems. It helps me de-stress. It's really beautiful. I was running there the other night in a lightning storm when the rain was coming down. I've run there when it's very, very hot. It's just great. And it's 20 minutes, 10 minutes each way, sit on my tree halfway round, maybe do some emails, maybe not. Just kind of take stock of the day. Probably do that 3 times a week. Do some longer stuff as well. But really, that's kind of, it's great to have an exercise that's all I need. All I need to sort of reset and retune. Yeah.
It's lovely that we're in Hebden Bridge, which is a pretty, but it's very sort of industrial landscape. And then we crossed the Leeds-Liverpool Canal. We crossed...
No, the Rochdale Canal.
Oh, Rochdale Canal. And we crossed the Leeds-Liverpool train track.
No, Leeds-Manchester train track. Or you could go to Blackburn.
Oh, this podcast is really exciting. And finally, the point of my sentence...
Sorry.
We got out into the woods. And instantly it changes, doesn't it? So... 5 minutes from your house, you're into this beautiful beech wood with rocks, big boulders covered in moss, and then tell me about the tree that we went to, because that was a really special tree, and I love a tree.
So it's just a beautiful tree that has a lovely curving out bough that sweeps sort of across the canal, and I just sit there and chill, watch it's often deer will walk across, solve my problems, take my time. It's also I always love that thing on a run where you've got a physical point to get to, like touch a lamppost and run back or something like that. It's nice to have that some sort of sense of like a datum just to sort of set yourself against.
Is it quite childish or childlike?
Yeah, possibly. It's like Tig, I'm in, bang, Relievo.
I mean, running like that is like playing, is scampering around.
Yeah, I don't use Strava anymore. I found that I was like running too fast, always trying to get like personal bests or KOMs or CRs or whatever. And my physio, Ali, actually just said, perhaps you need to come off Strava and just have fun. If you like running in the woods, because you like running in the woods, then why are you trying to time it and do it faster? And once you sort of abandon Strava and things like that, and just go for a run, you can go, oh, wonder what's down there, and run off like that. Used to be a bit like, I used to mountain bike with a dog. I had a collie, Cross, and he was quite good at that because you'd be on your regular track and he'd go off somewhere else and you'd go, oh, we don't go that, oh, well, let's go that way and see what happens. It's the unexpected.
Bringing some curiosity into it.
Curiosity, yes.
So one of the things that I'm doing here is riding around, asking different people for their take on how they go about trying to live adventurously. So what does living adventurously mean to you at this stage of your life?
I would say, I've given this quite some thought. I guess not having a job contract and not having a pension. I see that actually when I read the mountain bike forums, when I see how people talk about careers and savings and things like that. I think a lot of people would consider that, not having a pension or any form of job contract would be very adventurous.
Sorry, would they think it was adventurous or would they think it was stupid? Because there's a difference, isn't there?
Oh, you see, I've misunderstood adventure all my life in that case. I think
not necessarily. Tell me then.
I think, adventure, it's certainly exciting. Keeps me on my toes, gives me a challenge. Frankly, I read today about a guy who said that he and his wife had discussed their 10-year plan. And I thought, well, all the best to you, pal. Because I tell you, in this day and age, 10 years is an awfully long time. I wouldn't like to try and guess what's going to happen in the next 10 years. I would rather be, light on my feet, keep my eye immediately on where I'm going and try and be reactive. A bit like my running, really. That's cheesy. Right.
What can you do now that you won't be able to do in 10 years' time?
Well, I'm off to Copenhagen on the plane this afternoon. I'm sure we'll be able to do that in 10 years' time. I really don't know. I mean, it's very exciting. What are we in now? 2019, 2009. Well, we had the internet 10 years ago. There's some sort of like connections to customers and things like that are probably better than they were 10 years ago. So in terms of feedback, in terms of trying to get people to buy things now, which pay for my life, that's what we do. We sell helmets or shoes or trousers. So connections to things. I don't know. I mean, to predict the future well, somebody said it better than I, and I can't remember what the quote is. But, I really, I try and live, maybe a day, a couple of weeks at a time. Got my savings for my tax bill next year sorted out. So I'm cruising now. I'm just, trying to enjoy it. Trying not to work too hard. Trying not to buy too much stuff. Trying to, living kind of frugally. I don't have a big house. Certainly not a fancy house. And, just trying to make enough and offering people value and opportunities to have fun.
Cool. Well, another thing that I'm trying to do is I'm cycling around. So I've got my deck of question cards.
Is this the Brian Eno thing?
It's not the Brian Eno thing, but I do like the oblique strategies.
Yeah.
That is a good thing.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
You can get an app called Oblique Strategies.
It's not the same as cards, though, is it?
No, it's not that. These are just some questions I've written that I'm trying to answer, and I'm going around the sort of scrolling pack of different people to get different people's takes on things. So if you take a question from the top, you can ignore it if you want.
What is a good decision you have made in life? What can that teach me about making it? I assume that means you, yes?
Yes.
What is a good decision you have made in life? You're going to cut this bit out, this massive pause, aren't you?
No, because no. We have to depict the reality of your intelligence.
I don't want to get all soppy, but my absolute commitment to my current girlfriend has been transformative. And really, you know, to have an absolutely solid partner by your side when you're doing all this stupid stuff. She does have a pension. Oh, she's lovely. And that's clearly not why I'm with her at all, or why she's with me. But yeah, to have a rock solid partner there to support you through the sort of the crazy stuff and add a degree of stability. Because it kind of comes back to that, you know, startup thing. When you're starting anything, you can't afford to be pulling out lots of money and things like that. You need to plough everything into the business. One of the problems with HebTroCo is that we believed our own press. Fortunately, we were writing it.
Right, okay.
and so yeah, she lends a real sense of stability to everything that I do. And also she got me into running, and I got her into outdoor swimming, which is another thing that we do quite a lot of around here. Shame we haven't got time to go up onto Gaddings Dam up on the moor and go swimming. But
Great, thank you. Do another one? Yeah,
Lord.
We'll do a few.
What book should I read to make myself more wild, bold, and curious? I don't know. I like Boff Worley's book. I've got that upstairs. My cousin Paul lent me that. That's a good book.
Run Wild.
Run Wild, yeah.
I met him a couple of days ago.
He's quite local.
Yeah, I went
think.
to his house.
I've never met him. I've read his book. It's absolutely brilliant. He talks about the hundreds of times he's run to Studley Pike and back, which I used to hold the record on Strava for, until a bloke broke the record a week after I'd snapped my hamstring. And so I won't be getting, anyway, not on Strava anymore. That's a great book. My personal favourite book of all time is a book called All Quiet on the Orient Express by an author called Magnus Mills, which is a novel, but it's a beautifully, beautifully written novel about a man and a motorbike camping in the Lake District and his misadventures.
Oh, I'll definitely check that out. Thank you. Okay. Next.
Who was the most adventurous grown-up you knew when you were a child? My marvellous father. Yeah, it would have to be my dad. Yeah, definitely. When he met my mum, he was a rock climbing instructor at CHA Holidays. They met in Llanfyfechan. I think the weekend they met, he climbed a rock climb in the Llanberis Pass called Brant Direct, which is why I am called what I am called. He did the Welsh 3000ers when he was 40 in 11 and a half hours, a time that I still have not got anywhere close to, in spite of the fact he did it on Orange Pop with big walking boots and cheese sandwiches. He got me into cycling. He used to teach at a school about 6 miles from our house in Bingley, and he used to go by car. We used to ride quite a lot because I grew up originally in Goole near Hull, very flat. We used to ride bikes a lot there, and then when we moved to Bingley, it was very hilly. And one winter, it snowed an awful lot, and my dad had to get to school because the Lord Mayor was coming to open the new swimming pool. And so he actually borrowed my bike, and I would be about 9 at the time. He borrowed my bike and rode the 6 miles to school on this bike so he could set the school up for the Lord Mayor, and absolutely loved it and got back into cycling. And it was that kind of love of cycling that then combined with the kind of hill walking, that obviously led me into mountain biking, which, I got a mountain bike in 86. So that's, quite early days, really.
You're telling me your dad is still king of the mountains and some Strava segments now in his 70s.
Yeah, he absolutely loves Strava. In fact, we play Grandpa Bingo when we go to his house. It's seeing how long it is before he talks about Strava when we get there. He's got a Garmin, Forerunner watch, and it's really, really changed his attitude to cycling. He's got an on-one fat bike, actually. That's his weapon of choice at the moment, and a titanium frame that I made him too. But yeah, he's out there. I mean, he's probably riding 100 miles a week or something like that on kind of towpaths and stuff like that around Bingley. So yeah, it's loving it.
That's a good, inspiring note for us to end on, I think. He sounds like a very cool dad. Thank you very much for making me breakfast.
No problem.
Taking me for a run.
That's great.
And giving me all these good answers. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Living Adventurously. There's show notes from every episode on my website, alistairhumphreys.com/podcast. If you have enjoyed it, please take a screenshot of your phone and pop it up on social media or leave a review with your podcast provider. It makes a massive difference. Thank you very much. I teamed up with Komoot to make this podcast happen. In case you missed it, Komoot is an outdoor planning and navigation app that helps you explore more of the great outdoors. One of the many ways Komoot helps you have better adventures is with detailed route profiles. So, you've got your basic route in place with Komoot. Next step is to check the route profile. The profile displays the information you want to see, like the surface type, especially important if you're on a bike, and elevation profile, especially important for everyone, the ups and the downs. On a road bike, for example, that means you can anticipate the big climbs or ensure your adventure only includes tarmac, unless you want to spice it up and you want to suffer, in which case you can hunt for a gravel route or more single track. If you're hiking, you'll be able to see your elevation gain, as well as where on the route you'll need to push on to get through the uphills. Your very own outdoor experiences are waiting for you. Go explore more with Komoot. Head to komoot.com/G and use the voucher code ADVENTUROUS to claim your free region bundle.